We are born into a world that from the very first moment is telling us how to behave. From our initial breath, we are conditioned and molded into a way of being, often pulled one way or another. As we journey through our lives, we are subject to daily stress and the pressures of expectation and responsibility. We can become anxious and fearful, often dwelling in the past or worrying about the future, rarely enjoying the present. How can we learn to lead a more peaceful life? How can we remain in alignment when tossed and turned by the unpredictable nature of life's challenges? And how can we take ownership of our lives? In today's world of increasing complexity and uncertainty, where technology is replacing human connection, we learn from the age-old practice of mindfulness how to remain fully engaged in the present moment. By consciously directing our attention and, without judgment, encouraging a moment-to-moment awareness of thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, and the surrounding environment, we become a witness to the mind. And we can then enjoy the gift of the golden present. Mindfulness is no longer hidden in ancient spiritual texts, monasteries, and ashrams, but is practiced by millions of people the world over. Join us as we awaken to the power of the present moment and the magic that enables us to make peace with who we are, right now, in this moment.
Fabio, we can't avoid being in relationships.
No, not
We're in relationship with ourselves, with our partners, our family,
Absolutely.
our work peers. How important is it, do you think, to be mindful of one's own input in their relationships, to have that element of self-awareness and take personal responsibility for, all that we contribute in our relationships?
I think it's essential. As you said, that relationships are everywhere. And it's something that being mindfulness in a relationship is extremely important. But also being mindful of, what is it that wants from the relationship? What kind of desires bringing the relationship about to exist? Or what kind of desires might bring the relationship to break up as well? Because people have desires outside of relationships as well. So it's kind of a double-sided coin. You have to, mindfulness is great and it can bring about awareness for the very positive things. But on the other hand, you might discover it's about to move on. And what do you do? Look, you get loads of information through your body, through your mind, and all of that. What mindfulness does, it kind of ask you to pay attention to it. So some of the stuff that you're going to be aware of could be personal, really, really deep. Some other things could be about your relation to the outside. So for that very reason, you discover about yourself, but also you discover about yourself in relation to an environment you're in, whether that could be your partner, whether that could be your workplace, whether that could be in relation to the children, parents, and all of that.
I understand you also enter into the work environment and you are an agent of change there too.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. Organizations
are made of people, as you're aware. You work yourself into an organization, and inevitably, we relate to people in a different way depending on our own background, on our own history. Organizations can be extremely stressful, and that's where mindfulness comes in. And if you're under stress, everybody knows if you're under stress, you cannot make decisions properly, and really, you tend to act out rather than reflect and making proper decisions. So one of the advantages of mindfulness is that by identifying what are the stressors, if you like, by bringing awareness.
What I'd like to do is, if you're happy to share with me what sort of things you're afraid of. What sort of things stop you from doing what you want to do? And I'd like to just write it down, so you can just shout it out, and we work from there. Has anyone got anything? Shall I write failure with this as well?
Yes.
Trust, not being trusted. I asked my 5-year-old daughter what she was afraid of. I'm sure you can guess what she said. Monsters and dinosaurs. Yeah, she even made me one. I brought it for you. Look. But it's really clear to me and to all of you that this monster she describes is not real. It really just only exists in her imagination. That's the only place where her fears lie. What if we're not actually afraid of all of that? What if we're afraid of what we're thinking about that? We're built to feel the whole range of emotions that we have as human beings. You know, in fact, all our emotions are neutral. It's only us that have put a label on them, which are good and which are bad. Feeling shy and nervous and anxious and angry, those are all bad feelings. We don't want those. But I want the happy and content and lively. Those are the bits I want. Those bits, keep them. I'll just have that. No, it doesn't work like that. But also, who said that those feelings are bad? So, if there's one thing you take away from this talk, what I would like you to take away is just acknowledge that all feelings are safe. They're all safe. And you can feel all of them. And when you show up in the world present and engaged with where you're at in any one moment, that creates being fully alive. That creates bringing people along, inspiring people. That creates success. That creates creativity. That it all happens without effort.
Leaders are very unique people. They have a very simple distinction, and that is their thinking is different. Leaders do not think like followers. Leaders used to be followers, all of them. But what made them cross the line was a certain mentality that kicked in somewhere. Something happened to them that made them think differently.
Do you think everybody is a born leader?
I think the potential for leadership, we're meant to lead ourselves, number one. Again, as peace begins within, so does leadership begin within. How do we lead ourselves forward in our lives? How do we move ourselves forward? Decide what our vision is, our values, and how to align that vision with values. So leadership is an internal process more than anything else. How we lead ourselves is perhaps the most inspirational thing, how we lead our own lives. But leadership, I think, can be cultivated in people, and I think most people can be born to lead themselves. It doesn't matter what their intelligence levels are. We can all have more emotional intelligence. So mindfulness helps us to have more emotional intelligence.
Okay, now we're talking a little bit about the work environment, because obviously we spend a large time of our days and our lives in an office or wherever it is that we work with our colleagues. And some people enjoy what they do, some people not so much. So how important is it to really have that sense of awareness in a work environment?
Well, very important, because otherwise we're not as productive as we might be. Our performance can suffer, our relationships at work can suffer, and we can be mindlessly working rather than really focusing in. So mindfulness actually helps focus, it helps performance, it helps productivity. So it's a technique I often share with my executives. I do a lot of work in business, so I work with a lot of leaders, managing directors, CEOs and directors, and help them to have a more mindful practice. So as they move move through their days, they're taking moments to just steady themselves, to begin to think, to put a perspective on things, and again, to stop running habitual patterns that really don't work in the workplace. So very powerful in our businesses. And most leaders, well, in the world, will have a mindfulness practice because most coaches and mentors encourage them to do so.
Yes.
And their performance improves phenomenally. Their decision making improves phenomenally. So mindfulness affects so many ways that a human being functions.
Yes.
Very, very powerful.
And all of a sudden, I'm walking into these establishments where it's all about high-tech, very fired people that are sort of in this world that connects the whole world, and it's just so fast, and it's changing, and it's metamorphosizing as you go along. And I arrive, and the moment that the employees are receptive to yoga, and they've been gifted this by their employers as probably to counteract what life is like working in an office 5 days a week minimum, 8 hours a day minimum, in a same position minimum, in a booth, looking at a screen where everything is
Pretty
down,
unnatural, let's face
forward,
it.
and eyes. And there's a lot happening.
Yeah.
There's not a quiet moment in the brain, and there's choices, decisions, actions that are happening all the time, but the pupils are just focused on that screen all the time, and the hands are just going all the time, and the body's doing nothing, and the breath is there, but it's trapped. So I think it's a way forward, really. And it's quite admirable that somewhere along the line, not just here, in all parts of the world, there's employers that have thought the well-being of the staff. So here, the alternative would be something that's natural, that's not disruptive. So the moment that the employees think, okay, I've never tried yoga before, maybe they offer it at my gym, but I never have the time, or I miss it, or I've got kids to feed as soon as I get home. At work, well, what's the harm? Let me try it. You know, and sometimes they start with a giggle, or I don't think I'll be able to do yoga, I'm too stiff.
Yeah.
And I think, well, give it a try. You might surprise yourself on how stiffness just evolves into something quite graceful and beautiful and expressive. So the moment the employees have got this allocated slot, as soon as I arrive, there's a little bit of very subtle background music. The mats are unrolled in a very tight space, but all you need, again, you're defining that mat space. We do a little bit of breath, simple stretches to counteract the sitting position, the stooping over, the tech neck. And eventually we'll do some balancing postures, some floor work, and we always end with a light, deep relaxation. It sounds contradictory, a light, deep relaxation. Light because as soon as the session finishes, there's no time wasted. The back at that office desk. But the mental chip has changed. The mind has been reset.
Yes,
just
feeling
like
restored, and there's a sense of self-appreciation, and not only yourself, your employer is valuing your time and is in effect making you a more productive individual at work.
it
surely.
creates a sense of being valued, and you feel valued as an individual. You have something collective as a team that you then discuss on your way in the lift. Oh, we have yoga today. How do you go to? Oh, you know, and all of a sudden they have that something in common. That's not having to go to the club after work or having to go for drinks after work. All that has been tried and tested, and it creates team spirit, but it doesn't do anything to empower you. Doing something like office yoga corrects your posture, corrects your breath, corrects your mental awareness, and you have something in common.
Mission statement is positively transforming family life. That is my mission statement of my law firm. And it's because, to me, lawyers have a huge responsibility, family lawyers especially. When clients come to us, they come at a very low ebb. Not everyone, but many do. And some of them, as I say, like almost crawling at an emotional level. So to me, again, just to be a lawyer who sits with them and discusses their legal problem and keeps them within that box and then finishes the legal problem, sends them the bill and on their way is just not good enough, because maybe we are the first opportunity for an intervention in that person's life. And if we are, then I think we owe that client a duty to at least point them into the right direction. Because don't get me wrong, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a family therapist. My role is family law and I'm a barrister. However, working holistically means that I'm engaging my senses, I'm engaging my intuition, I'm being mindful, and I then know exactly where I need to signpost my clients.
And then when things started going sort of wrong with the other party, I remember calling Amber very distressed. This has happened, this has happened, this has happened. And she used to say, Daphne, calm down, you know. We're going to do this, and we are not going to do this. And no, but it's not fair, because no, that's not the way we go. Please. And that's the way I learned how not to bring out the anger, not to think, in a negative way, because divorce is always very painful.
What I try and do is remove the judgment and say, look, don't beat yourself up about this. You weren't aware. But now you have an opportunity to become aware. Yes. It means that, okay, we'll deal with this divorce or this separation mindfully in a way that causes the least emotional harm and more wellness. And at the same time, let's work on sending you to get the support you need to start identifying the pattern that you have, whatever's inside you that is attracting that into your life again and again and again. Yes. And I call it an intervention. It's an intervention. And so that is why I developed this. I developed this idea of practice through the very strong feeling of unfairness and injustice within the justice system for families.
I remember in the middle of the process, she was talking to me about getting a new approach to her work and to finding a new way of working and finding her own way as well. And she used to mention at the beginning holistic, and I used to say, holistic? I thought it was something to do with plants and holistic. But then when she started talking to me about mindfulness and awareness and positivity and all of that, I said, I want to go down that path as well.
When I started my holistic law practice, which I opened, Amber Law, which I opened in 2013, I, honest to God, this is really embarrassing to admit, but I thought I'd invented this holistic law model, right? Yes. And it was only after a number of years that I came across books and I did some more research, and I found out that it was in the 1970s in the USA that the term not holistic law, this is why I couldn't find it so easily, but there was therapeutic justice, restorative justice, collaborative law. Now we are seeing more and more collaborative law firms come up. So what is collaborative law? Basically, there are law firms where the couple go together to the law firm. They're each assigned a lawyer within the same law firm, and they sign what's called a participation agreement. And within that agreement, they're both agreeing that neither lawyer will ever litigate the case. Okay. So from the very first step, the threat of litigation, the threat of courtroom battles is completely eliminated. And then what happens is that there's a series of meetings where the lawyers meet together with the parties, and together as a team, they work on what the family needs are. Yeah. And so the beauty of collaborative law is that they also bring in any other specialist that is needed, such as counselors, such as family therapists, and so on, to support whatever the family needs or the individual needs are. So I believe so strongly that the way forward in having a mindfulness divorce and in ensuring there is fairness is to let go of the blame, let go of the war. And as I also tell some of my clients when things are very fraught, I say there's no point winning the battles and losing the war.
Let's do that. Let's just no war, no answering. Let's just take care of the children. And actually the process that she led me through was like to take care of myself, to grow as a person, to learn from what is happening to me, because after and actually many times she was like, okay, the divorce is gonna come one day, oh, this is gonna be resolved one day, what are you gonna do after that? You have to, you know, build your life from now through this. And if you want a good life, you have to focus on the good things and the positive things and start building this from now. I said, no, once this is all resolved, then no, now. We do that now.
Today's life is very fast-paced. There's a lot of input and a lot of mental input constantly, whether that's the radio, the phone, TV, emails, work. We do so much. And so we live our lives very differently. I mean, there's nothing wrong with going out and achieving and wanting to do stuff in the world and making changes and having a positive impact. Quite the opposite. I think that's what's really needed in the world. But I think there's a misunderstanding of where that's coming from. In our natural state of being, we are incredibly creative, resilient, we have new ideas, we have an immense amount of clarity. We are able to create and do things so much better than when we're trying to do it in that doing state.
Yes.
We're going to meet Viktor Frankl, the internationally famous psychiatrist, writer, and lecturer. He deals with the most common ailment of our time, meaninglessness.
Certainly nobody of us is spared suffering at one time or another. But everybody, in the midst of suffering, is given a chance to bear testimony of the human potential at its best, which is to turn a personal tragedy into a human triumph.
Viktor Frankl wrote an amazing book, Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz. His mother, his father and his wife, and I think his brother, did not survive Auschwitz. And Viktor Frankl said some amazing things. He actually triggered the whole humanistic movement in psychology because he inspired so many psychologists. And he said, between a stimulus, something that happens in our lives, and our reaction to that, there's a pause.
Yes.
Where we can respond mindfully. He didn't use the word mindfully, but that's what he was talking about. We can become aware rather than being in a process of continuously reacting to things. And in families and in relationships, you can have what we call in neurolinguistics an anchor, that somebody speaks with a certain tone and it triggers something in you. Somebody looks at you with a certain expression and it triggers something in you. So a mindfulness practice allows you to just pause, to engage your mind, this frontal cortex of the mind, and to respond rather than react.
Yes.
To think before we react mindlessly. So we can react all of the while in our families mindlessly. Just continuous responses to things without thinking about them. So a mindfulness practice within a family, a glorious thing to do.